Welcome to Bite Size, brought to you by Priestley's Gourmet Delights. Each episode will bring you ideas, news and insights into the food service industry with a bite-sized summary. I'm Xanny Christophersen and I will be your host. All right, so hi, I'm Xanny and I'm your host for Bite Size, brought to you by Priestley's Gourmet Delights. This episode is a little different for me today as I'll be interviewing a very special guest, my dad and board member Tony. Now, they say that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, and I'd say that that's the case in this scenario. So please watch your P's and Q's as we welcome my guest, Tony Christopherson.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so I guess the purpose of the episode today is really to get a little bit of understanding around your wise words of wisdom around how to incorporate family and business all together, because it can be a challenge. But first of all, I really wanted you to introduce who you are and where you fit into the Priestley story, so we can ask some further questions of you.
Thank you. I fit into the story, really it started earlier than when we bought the business, in that my brother-in-law owned Priestley's, which was a very, very small bakery and a small distribution business. My sister-in-law, who I think you have mentioned before, Marilyn Jones, owned a distribution business in the Sunshine Coast called Gourmet Delights. Mm-hmm. In the 13th of January 1996, we purchased Priestley's from Mark, that is Peter Jones, Marilyn, myself and my wife Judith, and we incorporated the businesses together to become Priestley's Gourmet Delights.
Yeah, and what was your history before getting into Priestley's, and why did you choose to, I guess, exit your previous life and jump into a family business where you've got sisters-in-laws and brothers-in-laws involved and, of course, your wife? So talk me through your change and why you wanted such a change.
I think I saw an opportunity that I had worked in corporations, and working in corporations, as you work towards the top, you find that the effort you get is not often commensurate with the reward.
Yeah.
And I saw an opportunity that, I had some skills in sales and marketing and administration that I could bring them to my own or our own business. Mm-hmm. So we purchased Priestley's, which was 7 people and a very small business, 32 square metres of warehouse, manufacturing, distribution, administration, and grew the business from there.
Okay, so you've jumped in 32 square metre and you've jumped into bed with your sister-in-law, your brother-in-law and your wife. Tell me about that, and how have you made it work and be so successful over the last, what are we in, 28
years?
Yeah.
Peter Jones and I had gone back a long way. We'd both worked for the same corporation, so we knew each other very well. Mm-hmm. And though I had introduced Peter to Marilyn in the early days, I hadn't had a lot to do with Marilyn.
Yeah.
But the opportunity came, and where this business started and from day one really set its roots was that the three of us managed our separate parts of the business.
Yeah.
And so Peter looked after sales, Marilyn looked after manufacturing, or the bakery as we called it in those days, and I looked after administration, the office, distribution and purchasing.
Yeah.
So that meant that we had 3 people, all with some business knowledge, managing a business. Most of our competitors had just one person, mostly a chef, running their businesses. So we're really able to maximise every opportunity.
And each other's strengths in that scenario as well. And I know firsthand that it's not always been smooth sailing. And when there's a hot topic to discuss, that, you guys get in a room and are able to sort it out. But how does it affect family life?
Well, to me, business is business, and it's always been. I've never taken business home. I think that one of the strengths is that we do have some rigorous conversations, and I think that's reasonable and fair that each partner puts forward their ideas. But in the end, and in every circumstance, we've come to an agreement what is the right direction. And there has never in all these years been a falling out between the partners. No,
and I think that's one of the things that I really value about it, is the fact that we can still be a family whilst running a medium-sized business that's very successful.
It meant, though, that, of course, the way we set the business up, Marilyn was very, very busy in her part of the business. I was busy in mine and Peter was busy in his. So it wasn't as if we were all in each other's laps every day, quite the reverse.
Thank God for that, huh?
You're right.
Now, they say that you shouldn't play favourites, but I'd beg to differ on this one. So did you always see me stepping into the business as the CEO?
No. I had never thought that. But what I've always thought is that the business sees opportunities, and it sees opportunities in many areas. And one of the things that, as you had grown into the business, we saw the opportunity for you to take the CEO role when you became ready. Now, it was certainly not obvious until the last 3 or 4 years that you would be ready.
Oh, come on, I bossed you around enough as a child.
And it would have been a big mistake to just give you the job if we didn't think you were the right person. I've always said to you for a long time, your biggest problem is your surname. You're the boss's daughter, and you always have a lot more to prove than any other employee.
And I still do to this day, don't I, TC?
I think so, but I think you're living up to it.
Thank God for that. Lucky I still have a job after today. Now, I guess just for the listeners out there, I'll give you a bit of history about myself and how I found myself back in the family business. Because like you've just heard from TC, he didn't see me in the family business as the CEO, and I didn't see myself in the family business. But I remember after I had done my 3-year stint overseas and I worked for a high-frequency trading company, so in finance, I came back to Brisbane and I remember the conversation really clearly in my head because I wasn't doing too much around the house, and Tony came to me with a proposition. And it was, can you come back into the business and solve a problem for me? I really need your help. And I was like, well, of course, but I want to work 9 till 3. And I demanded a certain rate of pay to be able to get back into the business.
Nothing has ever changed.
You don't ask, you don't get in this world.
That's correct.
And I guess ever since then, I've never come back out of the business. So I think I'm 14 years in right now. And I guess with that, you know, I've been the plant manager, the COO, and now the CEO. Were you ever nervous about the dynamics and how that would change?
Not really. Again, we saw that you had stepped up to every one of the roles and been very innovative and taken your crew with you. So we had every confidence that you would be able to do this role.
And then I guess what would be interesting for the listeners is just to give a little bit more around the structure of the business, because I know we've had a little bit of a chat about it. And I mean, you're not my boss, even though like you like to tell me that. So do you want to just chat through like the board structure and how you landed in structuring it that way?
I think if we go back, this business has been reinvented 3 times, and it's important to go there. And each time we saw an opportunity. You know, the business was a small, fresh, chilled product, a business that had its own delivery vehicles in Brisbane. We grew a distribution network in country Queensland, and then we grew our own distribution in Sydney and Melbourne, owning our own warehouses. So we were able to leverage, you know, our manufacturing assets. But the next reinvention was we went to a frozen food model. And that allowed us to go to universal distribution and stop our own distribution, which meant that you could buy our product, the same product, for the same price anywhere in Australia.
Yeah.
The third reinvention is to where you're leading, is that we stepped away from the business. You know, we had been there 15 years and it needed new ideas. It needed a refresh. And so we hired very, very senior qualified executives and also instigated a board structure. Now, the board structure is such that we have an independent chairman whom you report to, and that means that you and I also operate at arm's length. And I've always said never negotiate with terrorists. So it's
I think you're talking about my daughter, not me. Talk about the apple not falling far from the tree, yes. So that's meant that, and it works well, and I would implore anyone in a small business that is looking to grow is to look for outside help, outside mentoring, because you will be surprised what these people will bring to your business in fresh, new ideas. Well, it's like I always say, like you don't know what you don't know until you know it, and once you know it, you can't unknow it. the other bit of advice that I would give is that you've got to behave the way in which you want to grow. So if you're trying to double your business, you need to start to think, what would that behaviour look like, so you can start to build that within your organisation.
My other bit of advice would be, if you're going to hire a dog, don't bark yourself. What I mean, if you have, chairman and other board members, they then have to have the say in the business, because it's pointless having outside mentoring if it's your way or the highway.
Yeah. So I always find it really interesting because I've always admired from afar, I guess, the directors of the business. So yourself, don't take this to heart. Oh, what do I want to say?
Careful.
Don't make your head big over this, but I've always admired from afar, what you, Marilyn, Pete and Jude have done with the business. But what was the tipping point for you to build in the structure and step away from the business to allow the business to step back up and grow again?
I think that was very simple. It became very evident. And I remember having a meeting with the other directors in our boardroom in Bream Place, and all of us saying, well, we've run out of ideas. We've worked for 15 years, got a very large business, medium-sized business. It is now time, if we're going to keep ownership of this business, that we need to take a break and step back. And so it really meant that to do that, we had to employ key executives to take our roles.
Mm. And I guess it wasn't always set in your head that it was going to be a family business, was it?
Well, who knows what tomorrow brings? But every time there's an opportunity, we've grabbed it. Mm. And some people say these opportunities are never obvious. I'd say in business, if you look at your business and look at the opportunities, how will we to best utilise all of our assets, for example? And that was growing distribution. Mm. How will we best utilise the owner's opportunities?
I think that's a really great point, right? Because it's about how do you step back from your business to look at it from high above so that you can see the opportunities versus working in your business on the day-to-day. Because if you're in the day-to-day and you're not looking above, you don't see the opportunities.
You almost become a consultant to your own business. Mm. And it also allows you to look outside at other businesses and be involved with other people in business. Mm. And I know, just talking to, fellow businessmen, even our bankers, they provide some insights into their business. Some of them are very relevant to our business.
Yeah. Well, business is business. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. You apply the same logic.
Product, price, promotion and place.
Yeah. Now, chat through, with any family business, I guess there's tough times as well. And I've certainly lived through some of them with you. What was the toughest time in our 28-year history that you can remember?
People say, oh, it must have been COVID. And that was when on a Sunday night we were sitting at home and the Prime Minister lists all of our customers that were not able to open the next morning. And obviously that meant that we had to react and change the style of the business. But, through the GFC, we had times where we've had extreme cash flow problems and had to rejig the style and size of our business to suit the current economy.
Yeah. And I think that's the other thing, right, is, you can have a 5-year strategy, but I think what I really love about this business is it's agile enough to pivot with the times and make the changes as we need to make the changes versus waiting, which sometimes can happen in big corporations because of red tape. We can jump into a board meeting, have a chat, and then, grab the next opportunity if there is one.
Well, it's that hybrid vigour that we had as a small business, and my biggest fear of any business is that you lose that hybrid vigour as you get bigger.
Yeah. Okay, and how do the rest of the family fit into the business? Where are my siblings in it?
Well, they have their own careers. The two boys are obviously builders, and your sister is a very successful, nurse in her career in Sydney. So they've never ever been interested in the business apart from coming to raid the chocolate bin. When
Put Smarties on the cookies.
I forced them to come and work for slave labour rates.
You mean when Mum kicked us out of the house?
Correct.
For school holidays.
But that was great. I mean, they learned something about a business. And I remember John particularly one night. We walked out of what was Wellington Road, our second premises then, and he walked out and he said, "Gee, it's still light." That's amazing. And that's That's what family businesses do. They work to get the job done so customers get their product tomorrow.
Yeah, and I still remember you being on the back of the slice line with Ming pushing through the slices to make sure that we'd got enough product out the door for the delivery drivers the next day.
You have to love the business you're in.
Yeah.
And there were several days that we didn't go home.
So I have a question for you that's a bit off script, which is around leadership. You know, you, Marilyn, Peter, Jude, you know, all exhibit so much passion in the business. How do you get your executive team and your leadership team to embody that passion as well?
Excite them.
How?
Give them a reason to come to work. You know, whether it's product, it's winning and growing the business and having them part of that growth. You know, I would see our sales reps come in just, you know, grinning ear to ear because they have won, you know, a whole lot of new business.
Yeah.
And, you know, we would sit with them and enjoy that experience.
Yeah, celebrate the successes. Yeah, and I liken business as, you know, you've just got to take more steps forwards than what you do backwards.
You do, but I also think that at every level of our business, they felt they were supported. Marilyn would go to war with anyone who held back production. Peter would go to war with anyone who didn't help the sales reps, and I would certainly go to war with anyone who wasn't pulling their weight. You know, if the phones weren't answered in 2 rings because we were a direct sell company, then I was on the warpath. You know, we had to have an excellent customer service philosophy, and that's internal and external customers.
Yeah, you can't. The service-centric approach definitely is where businesses can win or lose customers.
Well, we had a situation that, and this was in all of our 3 centres, that if a customer, a chef, say, or a cafe, placed an order before 3 a.m.
Next day delivery.
That product would be delivered that morning. So, and chefs would ring us and say, this is amazing. They'd knock off, finish the shift, place the order. Because quite simply, we would have people downloading the answering machine and packing those late orders to go on the delivery vehicles.
It's the unmet need.
Well, it meant that it sets you aside from any of your competitors. And again, it comes back because we had focus in each of the key areas of our business that we were able to succeed.
Yeah. So what's next for you? Do you think you'll always be involved in Priestley's? Oh,
I think so. I think, you know, it's a very exciting time for the business. We've moved into Research Street, you know, a bit of a history. We went from 32 square metres, our first building, to 600 square metres in Wellington Road, and we mezzanine that building. Then we bought the one next door and mezzanine that building and knocked a hole in the wall, and we had 2 lifts operating. And then we moved to Breen Place, which is 4,500 square metres, and now to Research Street, which is a, you know, a custom planned manufacturing facility at 7,500 square metres. So I'm looking forward to seeing the opportunity that you know, the new premises and the new exec team will bring.
Yeah, and I know that we're going to be very successful.
I'm sure.
All right, and then I guess if you were to wrap it up, what are your top 3 things that you would advise small business owners to, I guess, lean into and understand within their own businesses?
I think one of the things is the accounting thing. What is your break even? Okay, you know, all businesses have an overhead structure and they have a requirement to have certain revenues that break even. Determine that so you know where you're going. And that break even includes paying yourself a real wage. It is no use doing this for nothing because it's false. The second and one of the most important things is resource your business. It is no use doing advertising, whatever, if the phones aren't answered. If your customers come to you and are not satisfied, you've spent all the money and you need to be able to satisfy those customers, whether it's product, customer service. And the third is simply enjoy it. You've got to love the business you're in and make it so you do love it because you want to come to work every day. Because there will be bad days. There just is.
Oh, I think the number one pain point, I think, for business is people, right? People drive outcomes for your business. So, you know, they can be...
That's the resourcing part.
Yeah, absolutely. So they're the biggest pain, but also the most joy when you get it right.
Yep.
Anyway, you've heard it from the horse's mouth himself. That was Tony Christopherson, my father. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Bite Size. Please remember to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify so you're notified when a new episode is live. To find out more about our business, please make sure you follow us on Instagram at Priestley's Gourmet Delights. Thanks and have a wonderful day. Thank you for listening to today's bite-sized episode. We hope you got some industry insights and tips for your business. Subscribe to our podcast and tune in to our next episode. Feel free to reach out to me for any comments and questions via LinkedIn.